Hello and welcome to the Beyond 6 Seconds podcast. I'm your host, Carolyn Keel, and on today's episode, I'm speaking with Shayonee Dasgupta. Shayonee is a Mumbai-based freelance writer and editor who initially pursued a career in law, working with corporate law firms in India. She found out she's autistic and has ADHD in her 30s, prompting a transformative journey of self-discovery and learning to navigate life anew. Shayonee, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much, Carolyn. So nice to meet you and lovely to be here on the podcast.
Thank you. It's great to meet you too, and happy to have you here. So I'd love to learn more about your personal story. So what was it like growing up before you had your autism and ADHD diagnoses?
I think right from when I can remember in childhood, I have always felt that something was weird about me, that, I was just not like the other people around me. I would replay every single conversation that I would have with my parents or with my friends at school. I found it difficult to socialize, play with kids my age, and every social interaction, even with family, was always a challenge. And I think as I neared the uh, teenage years, my parents simply thought that I was just throwing a tantrum, but it became increasingly difficult to present myself or talk to people. And I think, I mean, now I know I was masking and scripting, but then I developed all these coping mechanisms where I would go through a list of things in my head before I would meet someone, or just give the responses that I think they would like to hear, and never really express what I truly felt about pretty much anything. The other thing was that my father, I moved around a lot when I was growing up, like 3 years in one city and then next 3 years in a different city because of the kind of work that my father did. And that just added to the problem because I felt that the closer I was to kind of somehow setting on a script and following through and kind of, hiding behind that all that weirdness and perfecting a mask, then I would have to change that all over and start afresh. And always looking for cues and trying to understand what the other person wants to hear from me. How do I best sort of please them? And that also meant that I focused excessively on doing well in my academics because I knew that I had a lot of social deficits, so as to say. I was not even like good at any outdoor activity. I would start off, learning something, but they would all be very short-lived. So my parents thought that I was very impulsive, that today it's painting, tomorrow it's dancing or something like that. So all of that was just, okay, let me just be this straight A student so that no one has a chance to complain. And as women, especially as girls growing up, I think there's also a template that you have to follow. So it was very, I think, subconsciously, I was absorbing all of it. And there was a little voice in my head that told me that, you know what, something is missing. But I just powered through it because that is what we are taught, that that's how you're just supposed to go on with life.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting when you look back after knowing that you're autistic and have ADHD. It's like, oh, okay, I understand how so much in my life made sense. But yeah, when you're going through it, it just seems like these are the expectations of me and I just have to figure it out. And then you, as you said, you create these different coping mechanisms and sort
Yeah.
of masking the way that you think and look and feel and everything about you. And it just becomes part of your life. Yeah.
In fact, I
And
remember that I would have difficulty in establishing eye contact when I was in school, and or I would, excessively flap my hands when I would talk. And that always, all teachers used to point out that, why do you do this? You shouldn't be fidgeting so much. And after I would come back from school, I would just, I have a younger sibling, but I would just not allow her to say anything. I think it was my way to decompress after a whole day of masking.
yeah.
And I would just incessantly talk about what happened in school, very animated. And I think, but that's the thing, when you're so focused in school, nobody looks at it as something wrong because
Mm-hmm.
parents are very happy that she's so engaged in
Mm-hmm.
everything that's going on in school. But all of it was really to come back to my baseline because I just didn't know what was going on when I was spending those 6 7 hours in school.
Yeah. Yeah, you're spending all that energy,
Yeah.
trying to behave and act in a certain way at school that you just come home and like release it. It's,
Yeah.
just so much. Yeah. Wow. And so you started your career in actually a very intense field. You started your career in the field of law, but you faced a lot of challenges when you were working in law. So what kind of
Yeah.
challenges did you face working as a lawyer?
So I was a corporate transactional lawyer, so I never had to go to the court and litigate, and I don't even know how that would have
Mhm.
panned out for me. But even then, the constant need to interact and communicate became exhausting at a level. Like I would commute maybe an hour to reach work, and then there would be about 3-4 hours of calls or meetings or something or the other. And I felt that I just had no energy to really do anything after that. And it was also very difficult to really articulate this to my seniors, because you are expected to hustle, you're expected to put in the hours. And it was this silent struggle. That's how it all started. And I'm talking about the first 6 months of my career. I was absolutely confused that everyone seems to have that energy to go through or focus at the work, but I would just be exhausted with all the interaction, all the discussion, and sometimes the instructions would not be clear. There was a lot of expectation also to read between the lines and understand what the senior wanted. And I was extremely bad at it. And I think in environments like law firms, how you interact with your colleagues, what's your social standing, has a big impact on how your career graph is going to look. And I could never crack the code, because I would either become too friendly, too inquisitive, and that would be, you're being too nosy, or I would be too aloof, because I just didn't know what to do. What is the right amount of, what should I say? What should I not say? And I think this, coupled with the intense work that I was doing, it's like my brain was in a constant state of fatigue that I could just not recover from. And the hours were grueling, so it impacted my sleep. Because I was sleeping really less over a prolonged period of time, my executive functioning skills that were already impaired just, they took a larger hit. And that in turn started affecting the work. So it was almost like I wish I could just stop it all and chill out and reset. But that opportunity never came. I mean, I would, at best, I would take vacations. But since I didn't really know what was the reason why I was facing all of this, so I was doing it all like a neuroconfirming person. I would just think that I'm stressed and all I need is a vacation or maybe a massage, or and I developed this horrible habit of shopping constantly, because that was just my way to deal with stress, because I would keep having so many thoughts at the same time, and some of them would not be very pleasant thoughts, and I would constantly think of, should I just end my life? Is this even worth going through? I would fill that void with things and just, run up a credit card bill and think that that's all just going to get, it's okay. It is just a phase. It's just a phase. But over time, and I did this for 7 years.
Wow.
So it was not that, it just happened very soon. It was over time, the buildup was gradual. And looking back, I think I, in fact, entered a state of hyper focus because I was on a matter for a very long time. And somehow I think my neurodivergent skills and my brain really helped me, because of the hyper focus, everyone thought that I'm this excellent, person to have on the team. And even I thought that, maybe I've overcome all my challenges and now my path is clear. But I think the hyper focus got a bit much, because that was just followed by a shutdown and just absolutely losing control. I just didn't understand what was going on. I kept thinking it was my physical health. Then I thought it was also my mental health. I got married around the same time. So I was like, okay, too many big changes in life happening. And all of that led to this time of my life when I had no clue what was going on. I would wake up, force myself to go to work, and the day would just pass by and I would not get anything done. And I would just stare at my computer and be like, what has happened to me? It was like something inside, some piece has just gone missing. Eventually, this led to like a full blown burnout. It was just bad. Like I just couldn't continue working. And in the middle of a transaction, I put in my papers and I said, I can't do this, because I would be sitting in office and constantly think of not being alive, or how best to reduce the suffering. And these are not normal or healthy thoughts to have at all. And no job is worth dealing with these thoughts on a regular basis. Like I would go to sleep and have all of these thoughts marinating in my head, and I would dream of emails that have never hit my inbox. I would wake up with a jolt. So it was quite a journey.
Mm-hmm. Wow. And I would imagine it's tough because a lot of careers like law, it's almost like there's this expectation to be stressed out and like, oh, of course you're tired and stressed. You're working long hours and you're working really hard. So it's hard to really gauge like, okay, is this normal, or is this really like, no, this is a serious problem. Other people are not feeling this way, even though people may be saying like, oh yeah, 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 you need a vacation, you need a little break, and then you'll be fine. But yeah.
You're so right, because there's a lot of glorification of, how less you sleep. Like it's
Mm-hmm.
almost a competition that, oh, I was in office till 1 a.m. and then the other person goes just 1 a.m. I was here the whole night.
Mm-hmm.
In the beginning, I was like, how is this suddenly normal? And then the only answer that you get in return is that you get paid enough, as if money is the answer to
Yeah.
every single problem of life. It is in many ways,
Right.
but it just felt that, I was not in a position to even complain, because I was getting paid a lot. And I was
Right.
getting paid a lot. I wouldn't deny that.
Mm-hmm.
But every time I would try to even have a conversation with my colleagues that how is this even normal? Like my brain is no longer, I cannot work like this. Oh, you just suck it up, and it's for the
Yep.
money. And if you are too tired, then just blow it up over the weekend.
Mm-hmm.
And that not only is that an unhealthy cycle, it in no way helped me, because my needs on a day-to-day basis were not being met. And over
Right.
a period of time, it just became like the load was so much more that no matter what I did over the weekend, I was never going to feel de-stressed, so as
Mm-hmm.
to say.
Yeah, exactly. It's never, you come back to work and you're right back in the environment where you were. And it's
Yeah.
like almost like maybe you never had a break in the first place. Yeah. Wow.
Yeah, and there's a lot of passive aggressive behavior. Lawyers are not, honestly, the most nice. I think it maybe this comes with the work stress or what, but some people will unnecessarily be very unpleasant to you. They will not, what they can just say in clear, like 5 words, they will not say it. They'll expect you to just read their mind. And
Mm.
like I said in the beginning, that itself has been a challenge for me, because I can't understand what people want from me unless you just tell me in so many words.
Yeah.
So it all just added up. Looking back, I know that why the way it all ended, why it ended. It was not just an overnight thing. It was a build-up of so many years, so many transactions, so many nights that I have not slept, that one day my body had to just give in and say enough is enough. Now can't do anymore.
Wow. So you got to that point where you burned out and you wound up leaving the field of law and seeking help.
Yeah.
So yeah, tell me about that. Tell me about like seeking help after that, and how did that lead you to a diagnosis of autism and ADHD?
So initially when I had just quit. I just knew that I had to see a mental health professional. Like
Mm-hmm.
it was a no-brainer for me. It's not like someone else made the appointment. I made the appointment.
Mm-hmm.
I took myself to the clinic and I said that I know something, is wrong. And I started right from the beginning. What I initially noticed was that no one, in fact, gave me the time to really, recount all my experiences from childhood. They were very fixed on what the issue seems to be right now.
Yeah.
And immediately there was, oh, this is all anxiety, this is all depression. It was all very like, that's all that there is. And since there are no other diagnostic tests, like nobody's going to test my blood, or I'm not going to undergo any MRI, it was just suddenly like I just have a label and I have a diagnosis, and that's it. And it was a little jarring in the beginning. I felt that they were not really very keen on understanding the entire picture, but giving me a quick fix that, okay, go on medication, it will get better. But since it was my first brush with professional mental health care in India, I was like, okay, maybe medicine is the answer to my problem. But what I realized over time was that medication, therapy, I was very diligent with therapy. I would see my therapist twice a week in the beginning. It all felt that anything that they told me, nobody was understanding the real problem that I was facing. Because I even got the advice from the therapist would be like, oh, you need to work on a better to-do list. And I'm like, it was never the to-do list to you. How do I explain to you? I have a list, but I just can't like get started on things. So then they would just join the dots and say, oh, that is the depression. And I'm like, okay, but now I'm on medication. So if those symptoms are getting better, why is, and now let's say I have removed all the stressful tasks from my to-do list. Now there are much simpler things to do. Why am I still not able to do them? And I felt that nobody had answers. I think everybody just looked at, maybe they just look at patients as, a source of money. So it's very, the consultations are, okay, you know what, we'll take care of this in the next appointment. So you just go home with those medicines, with some advice from your therapist, and you're like, I don't know what's wrong. And I went through it, like I started with the medication and therapy. Then I was like, maybe it's my diet, maybe it's exercise. I went through that whole, let's have a more holistic view towards life. But nothing I did gave me that one, I never had that feeling that, okay, yes, this seems to be the problem all along. And I had almost given up. And I was, I had told my husband that it's just this bizarre sort of, something happened and my life has changed. I'm not the person that I used to be. I have known all along something was not okay, but somehow I was able to keep up with the demands, and now I no longer can. And around pandemic, I was speaking to someone who was, looking for people who are enjoying the experience of, not interacting with people and not sort of, having that social pressure is not there. And during that conversation, based on whatever I was telling this friend of mine, later she reached out to me and said, there's so much that I could relate to from what you told me. And have you ever considered the possibility that you could be on the spectrum? And I had no idea. It was all completely new information for me. And initially I was like, I don't know. And because I was so tired of this whole, having to, I changed doctors when I was not getting the results. So every time I would go in and I would think that they would have the answer, they would shut me down, they would give me a new label, or they'll just give me a new prescription. I was really tired and I was like, do I even want to go down this path again? But I took a lot of time to just read up and explore. And I got onto YouTube, Reddit to hear it from people, what it was like, what sort of experiences are they having. And the more I read, I was like, wow, now it was a light bulb moment that suddenly so many things were making sense. And I could actually, read about people having very, very similar experiences, almost like I was reading my own story. And that is when I decided that, okay, it is still, I mean, it just gave me enough, I would say, motivation to pursue a diagnosis, because I was at that stage. I had completely checked out from my life, and I was like, I don't know, something is wrong, and I'll never know what the real reason is. So that is the process from the the struggle with general like mental health issue as an umbrella to specifically pursuing a diagnosis of whether or not I was on the spectrum.
Wow. So once you started sort of doing your own research and exploration and saying like, oh, I think that this might be what's been causing all the challenges in my life. Potentially it could be, I might be autistic, I might have ADHD. How did you go about getting a diagnosis? Because I know in the United States, it can be a challenge as an adult to even find a provider who will, give you a diagnosis or take you through the process to see if that's something that applies to you.
It's the same here. It's
Mm-hmm.
not the easiest thing to do. I think I just got lucky that the person I was speaking to, she was almost about to complete her, the assessment process. So as soon as I reached out to her and I was like, you know what, now I have done my research. I am willing to explore more. She passed on the contacts and I set up the appointments myself. And I say this because previously, whichever mental health professional I went to, there was no mention of neurodivergence at all. Like these are all new terms that I'm discovering as a patient. And I am doing all the work of, whether or not I should be screened. So the only good thing was that because of the pandemic, the organization that I contacted, they had started this online assessment process. Otherwise, their offices are in Delhi, and they usually are, after I think, an initial assessment over the phone, they ask people to come over to Delhi. But because of the pandemic, they were agreeable to do the whole process online.
Mm-hmm.
And I contacted them. I set up a initial appointment with the person, and I think for the first time I was able to take them from my childhood to the circumstances that I was in, without like someone constantly jumping in and saying, oh, okay, that what you're describing is just depression.
Mm-hmm.
And I felt so validated. Like I was like, I don't know what the result of the assessment will be, but just to be able to speak so freely, and to be able to actually, that person was not judging me for the kind of struggles that I was having on a daily basis. It felt really free. And then they started the process, which involved a questionnaire for me. Then my husband also had to fill up a similar questionnaire. And they had told me in the beginning that they wanted my parents to be involved, because, or someone who has seen me in the early years,
Yes.
around age 5, 6. And even though I share a good relationship with my parents, I couldn't tell them that, this was for like I was undergoing an assessment for autism. They were aware of the fact that I was seeing psychiatrists and therapists, and I had my struggles. So I told them, "Yeah, I'm just seeing a new therapist. It's a new approach, and that involves talking to parents." And I made up some story because
Mm-hmm.
I was so, that is the amount of stigma that I have, and that's just the condition. So I was like, they'll ask some very specific questions about my childhood, and since you're the only people who can answer those questions, you need to get on this call. And it started from there, and it was a extensive process that I think lasted for about 4 months. Once I had finished the written assessment and my husband had also sent his assessment, they had interviews with me, with my parents, different sort of conversations each time we spoke. And December of 2021, I think I started the process around maybe August, September, and in December 2021, they finally told me, like, I had my last call scheduled, and the evaluator was like, yeah, this is it, like this is what you need to know. And it was, I mean, it was a very surreal moment, I would say. I mean, I think a part of my brain was prepared to hear that you're not on the spectrum, because I was already thinking that if I discover that I'm not on the spectrum, then what explains the way things are going in my life? So the other part was like really wishing that I really hope I get an answer this time.
Yeah.
And uh, that's how it was.
Wow. Yeah, as you're telling me your experience, a lot of those feelings and experiences going through the diagnosis process sound so familiar to me, because I think
Yeah, I can
I was
imagine.
going through it around the same time actually as you
Right.
are. And yeah, those
Oh,
feelings of like I'm hoping I get an answer, like I'm hoping in some ways you're hoping that you get validated because you've done all this research. I'm like, oh, this could be the answer, and I'd be so excited to know what the issue is. And then other parts are like, well, but maybe it's not this, and maybe it's, well, for me it's like maybe it's like all in my head, and I just like am convincing myself of something. But then you wind up getting the answer, and I don't know, for me it was like a mixture of emotions over time. So I don't know what it was like for you, getting the diagnosis, having that initial relief of, okay, this is finally it. But then after that, as you have time to process, did your feelings change about it over time?
it was a mix of, I mean, the first emotion was relief, just to know that, okay, this is like, there's some finality to the whole process. But immediately after that, I started thinking that, because I had done all the reading, did I, deliberately answer the assessment or appear a certain way that would lead the evaluator to feel that I'm autistic? And I went through all of that. That, did I appear too much? Was it, was I fooling them? Were they not really invested in the process? So that was like, I would, some days I would wake up and accept the answer, and other days I would constantly question the whole process, that, whether it was even conducted in the right manner or not. And I struggled with that pretty much whole, I think, the beginning of 2022. That was the only thing that kind of, it played on my mind heavily, that, because, and it was so bizarre that I really thought that if I found out that I was autistic, I would suddenly have answers to a lot of questions. But all it did was, it was like a floodgate of new questions now coming up.
Yeah.
And I would constantly wonder. And I remember I would go on Reddit and search, like, that, if you have a relatively, okay, problem free sort of a childhood, adulthood, growing up, and then suddenly things are going haywire, are there other people? And I was very desperate for that answer, that how is it that for so many years I was able to do this, and suddenly I was not?
Yeah.
And in fact, I in fact spoke to the evaluator once more after the official assessment was over, and they explained to me that, there was a structure you were operating. You, as a kid, you didn't really have too much on your plate apart from going to school. Everything else was taken care of, and slowly that structure is going away, and, you are being pushed into an environment where, and that's the expectation, that now you have been given all the tools and you should be able to operate independently, except that that's not the case with with folks who are neurodivergent. And some of it made sense, some of it, I would say, it was not that very neatly, packed stages of grief, but it was this something, it was like this, so many emotions all together, which I later also knew that it was, it's the autistic grief of even coming to terms with your identity as an autistic person. It was not a linear journey in any, uh, at any stage, I would say.
Yeah. Yeah. So much of it sounds so familiar. Yeah. And I think people don't realize, when they're getting or when they're about to get a diagnosis, or even just people looking in from the outside kind of see it in a very simplified way of like, okay, I'm going to get diagnosis and then I'm going to have all the answers to everything that happened in my life. And it doesn't really always work that way. And then sometimes as an adult, it's like, okay, great. Now I know what the issue is. Now what? So now you have to find a therapist or just supports on your own that can help you. And so you're kind of left to figure out a lot on your own, even after
Yeah.
getting that diagnosis. Yeah.
Yeah. And it was almost that I started looking at life as, now I have to relearn living life as an autistic person, because honestly, I have only tried to not live like an autistic person all this while. That was my first realization, that I have just developed a lot of skills or whatever, my coping mechanisms, to fit into something that I was I was not fit for to begin with. So in order to do that, and I was very clear that I need to see a therapist who will understand this. I did not want
Yeah.
to, just end up with a conventional therapist, because I knew that it's so hard to even get psychiatrists to take autism assessment seriously, which I discovered as, as time went. So I was very determined that this therapist has to be someone who understands what this is. So there was a period of time when I had no support. I was, my psychiatrists were not willing to accept the diagnosis. My previous therapists were also not willing to accept that, they were like, no, no, this is just overdiagnosed something. And
Right.
I was completely, there was just no support. And that was a really tough period, because it felt that someone gave me the answers, but then just snatched away, like just when I thought that I can finally find out
Mm-hmm.
how to live this life,
Yeah.
that life jacket is suddenly
Yeah.
snatched away from.
Yeah. It's like, here's the answer. Like, good luck
Yeah.
with your life, sort of
Yeah.
thing. Yeah. Wow.
So true.
Yeah. So, yeah. So you had to find those supports and basically, change your life. And you even wound up in a new career. So now you do freelance writing. So,
Yeah.
how did
Yeah.
you wind up choosing freelance writing as your new career?
I think writing is something that I started after I had quit and I had a few months of rest and relaxation, as my psychiatrist would tell me, to
Yeah.
just bounce back. And I found writing to be cathartic. And initially, I was just writing a lot, like, my thoughts, my feelings, and my whole struggle, everything. But as soon as, like, the savings were also kind of
Oh, yeah.
drying up, and I was like, I need to do something. But it was very, very interesting. I would say that I almost had a very visceral reaction every time I thought of going back to a law firm. It was almost like, I just wanted to throw up. I felt so nauseous that I took that as a signal from my body that, nothing doing it. I cannot go back to that. And it is difficult to restart a career suddenly after a certain age, because you don't have, like, you've trained to do certain things, you have that degree, and there are a lot of the barriers in India are such that they're always looking for a very specific degree for whatever it is that you want to pursue.
Oh,
It doesn't matter whether you have an interest in it or you can prove otherwise on the job, learn on the job. Nothing of that sort matters. So I thought that, writing was something where I was still able to market myself, because, that's how I got clients. I told them that, see, I have been writing just very different things. When I was a lawyer, I was writing and drafting. We call it drafting in the right, that's the right term. I was drafting contracts, but research is something that has been my bread and butter. So this is just research and writing in a different format. So I chose it, A, because the entry barrier was relatively low, and B, because I honestly at that point needed some income to start, because it was almost getting embarrassing that, I was like, no, I cannot, even though I was married, I was no longer dependent on my parents. I was like, no, I can't ask I can't dip into the joint finances. I need to, whatever this journey is, I have to do it on my own. And I needed the money. And it was not that I did speak to, allied fields around law. If there was any research opportunity, I was willing to even go in as an intern. But I felt that nothing really was working out, or maybe I was just getting impatient. So that is how the transition happened. And but I just knew that law was not going to happen. I At that point I didn't know that writing was going to be the career going forward, but I definitely knew that I could no longer go back and suddenly become a lawyer in a law firm, because, like I said, it was almost a like an instant reaction. I would just feel sick, that, and it got to a point where I couldn't even meet people I knew from that life, because it would just bring back everything for no fault of theirs, of course, but it was severe. It was just, I had to just relive everything. And I was like, you know what? I can't do this either. I need to literally, it was a rebirth of sorts, and relearning and doing everything.
yeah. Yeah. And that's interesting that your interest in research and that type that you
Yeah.
cultivated as a lawyer kind of led you to, okay, well, I can use my interest and my skills in research to write on other topics, things like that.
Yeah.
So yeah, so today, like, what's your favorite type of writing to do, whether it's topics or, different media, things like that?
I actually enjoy writing a lot on health and wellness issues, particularly women's health issue, because there's so much that I have discovered through my own journey that is not really, it's not just, the information is not so easily available.
Yeah.
That connecting those dots is something that really excites me.
Mhm.
But when I started, because I was so new to the field, I was open to pretty much writing on whatever came my way, because at that point it was all about survival.
Yeah.
But as I got into the thick of things and I figured, what interests me more, I figured that mental health, intersectionality, gender health, these are the kind of things that I want to write about. Or even my my struggles with being an autistic woman in India, that getting diagnosed with ADHD a year later. Because once the autism diagnosis was over, I was like, that then I kind of had a confidence that okay, maybe there is some missing piece of puzzle still, but that seemed like a more straightforward route for me. It was the journey from everything to finding out that I was autistic, which was more complicated
Mm-hmm.
in my case. So I like to write about these issues because a lot of it is actually also coming from my lived experience.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah, that's great. And I guess so clearly you took some time to, get started in freelance writing, and it sounds like you have kind of got you figured out how to navigate that world in terms of finding opportunities and finding the things that you really enjoy writing about. How did you find that your career as a writer is kind of like a really good fit for what you're doing right now?
There's more control on my schedule and there's less social interaction. I work from home. My coworkers are my two dogs. So it's like the perfect work environment to have. So that I think really helped. But at the same time, the kind of market that we operate in, there is again the person who is out there networking, marketing themselves, attending events, obviously gets more opportunities. That is something that I till date struggle with. I'm not the most, I land opportunities, but I'm not very good at networking. So I have to then go the extra mile of actually, cold emailing people. Or if I suddenly discover something on LinkedIn, I come across a call for a writer, I immediately send in my CV because I don't have that native network of contacts that I can dip into. Neither can I even market myself like that. So that continues to be a struggle. But what I really like is that because I have more control over my schedule, and the traditional idea of productivity that the day has to start at whatever 8 a.m. and then you just work, this is how you do it, you just take a break in between, those conditions no longer apply to my life, and that is what I enjoy. I think that is why it's a good fit, because it in some way it meets my needs as an autistic person. Because there are days when I don't switch on, and I don't have to force myself to switch on, and I can just take that as a easy day, or maybe not work, maybe the first half, start work in the second half. So those flexibilities is really what makes freelance writing a better fit for me. And it is it's a different world from law. Finances, I mean, it still doesn't pay me as much as I used to make as a lawyer, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
But I do not go to bed with a constant dread of I don't want to live my life, which I think was for me the lowest point. That I didn't even want to be alive, then what is even the point of having so much money in my bank account? So I'm still figuring it out. I'm every 2 months, I kind of sometimes I get into the thick of things and my writing business kind of takes off. But then last year there was a point where I had a complete shutdown, and it was a burnout because I was actually overworking myself. So I think now I have to also very realistically set goals that this is what I can do, this is how much I can do, and I need to operate within that. So there's been a lot of realization and learning on different levels, not just about myself, but generally a more intentional living. That how much do I want to work?
Mm-hmm.
Even in this new career, I don't want to have that commitment of I'm going to be working for 16 hours, because I know that will not come naturally, and then I will have to pay the a very heavy price and
Yeah,
then just be
yeah.
out of commission.
Wow, yeah, absolutely. And since making this career transition and even since getting your diagnosis and learning more about yourself, have you found it easier to kind of accept yourself now knowing that you are neurodivergent?
It's again there's no straight answer to this. Before I met my current therapist, who is neurodivergent herself, I was it took me a while to even understand the breadth of, what it means to be an autistic person. Uh, right now, I think I'm at a stage where I have definitely developed more self-compassion, which was not there right in the beginning. Because when I got the diagnosis, in my mind, I just wanted the answers to just be there and everything to work out in my favor. I didn't anticipate that getting the diagnosis is only tip of the iceberg, because then you have to now discover a whole new world and figure out what works for you. So post diagnosis, I have actually learned more about myself. I have been able to give names to things that I struggled with. Like, I didn't know masking, I didn't know I was scripting, but now I know what was going on. I have definitely become more aware of my body. It's like I'm actually very concerned about the signals that my body is sending. I place that above everything else. So overall, it may look that I'm too concerned about myself at all times, but it helps, because otherwise I have no other mechanism to know that where am I headed, what is not okay. So I'm doing like constant check-ins, or when I know that I have over socialized, then I know that I need to take a break. So those things have only come because now I have had that post diagnosis. I have had a lot of sessions with my therapist where we have just sort of worked out, and it was like teaching a child how to live, except that the child is a full grown adult. So I would tell my therapist that sometimes I meet people, and then when I meet in the beginning, I'm very anxious, but then I'll talk, and then I come home and I don't want to do anything for like the next 2 days. And then I understood that there's also a certain amount of burnout that comes with that added pressure of socializing, because then I'm masking a lot more, because I'm constantly trying to be an interesting person, not offend them, ask the right questions, say politically correct things. So now I know where to kind of, hit the, like, I will meet people, but I know that I can almost sense it that it's not, now I'm kind of done. And then I politely excuse myself from those gatherings. And that would have not happened had I not had all of this, the whole picture. When I think about it, it's on, just knowing that I'm autistic was not enough. I had to actually be able to put the pieces together, where therapy has helped a lot. And just I'm reading the resources, Reddit, YouTube. I'm constantly trying to understand how other neurodivergent individuals are navigating through life, and then applying that and trying to find out the answers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I feel like that self compassion is maybe that's like almost like a first step in terms of like, okay, how do I go forward and really start accepting myself? Because, yeah,
Yeah.
it's like giving yourself permission to not have to live up to the typical standards of, I don't know, the working world or a particular type of field. And yeah, and I think it's great that your therapist is neurodivergent. I think that at a
That
minimum,
really
like
helps.
neurodiversity affirming therapy is helpful, or just having a therapist or a
Yeah.
clinician who understands that. And, it's like the difference between the therapists you were seeing beforehand who were probably just
Yeah.
like, oh, let's address this specific problem. Like, just get a planner and you'll be fine. It's
Yeah.
like, no, this
Yeah.
is, neurodiversity affirming might be like, maybe you shouldn't be doing like 25 things at once. You don't have to. And how can we kind of, restructure things so that it works for you? Yeah.
And it also helps because the Indian society is such that there's so much of emphasis on doing well, having a great career, earning, a certain amount of money, having a good life, and making your parents proud, and
Mm-hmm.
the whole extended family
Yeah.
proud. That when you take a step back like this, I think my parents overall made peace with it. But I think like the extended family, everybody had so many opinions that, oh, she quit her job as a lawyer, she's only sitting at home, and so many iterations of that just therapy is really that outlet. And of course, knowing other people who similarly struggle, that it's okay to not be able to fit that, and that doesn't automatically translate into the biggest failure of my life,
Yeah.
because that is how it had started to feel at a point where, it all became like, oh my God, like, I am the only one who's not able to live life as per the expectations of the society. And
Mm-hmm.
with therapy, with time, I am slowly trying to get to that point where it I'm trying to tune out that noise, that okay, you may think that I'm a failure, but in my eyes I have had a very different journey. And it is also like I'm grateful to my body, to my mind, to my brain, that they have all been able to come together and still hold me through this entire ordeal.
Yeah. Yeah. Navigating those family expectations and then just the expectations of society in general is really, really difficult when you can't fit exactly into that narrow mold of what success is supposed to look like, allegedly.
And
Yeah.
it's a double whammy when you are a woman, right?
Oh,
Because
yeah.
it's so much. You also have to be like this domestic goddess. You
Mm-hmm.
have to be a great daughter-in-law. You have to be a great wife. You have to be a great daughter. You have to be excellent at work. And it almost felt that, I was like, oh my God, I'm a feminist and I'm not breaking the glass ceiling. And I'm actually prioritizing my needs, and I'm staying home and I'm taking so much rest. So many conflicting opinions, basically,
Yeah.
that I had to at some point. I was like, this is just, I can't do this. I need to have my own value system, my own principles that I believe in, and structure my life around that, because I felt that I was just getting pulled in so many directions, and I constantly felt that, am I doing enough? Am I becoming lazy? Am I not becoming lazy? And no wonder that that women are mostly missed, because there's so much expectation at all times to be that, that picture perfect something or the other at all times, that we
Yeah.
are all just trying to fit into the mold.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's why, like, no wonder I was so exhausted all these years, because subconsciously I'm always trying to be that someone. And
Yeah.
it always felt that it was like this little elusive little thing. I could just never hit, that image of myself that I had in my head. And now it seems a little liberating, where I'm giving myself the freedom to make a new image and
Mm-hmm.
not have a set notion of how it is supposed to be. That maybe my life is about having all these experiences and not having like a big snazzy title and lots of money and a fancy house. And that is also a valid way to live life. That doesn't make me a failure.
Yeah. Yeah. I've always thought that, as I talk to more and more adults who are neurodivergent, I feel like seeing adults that really have found ways to live their best life and define success in their own ways, as autistic people, as autistic women, as people with ADHD, like that in itself is really revolutionary. Like that is,
Yes.
just carving out your own success and not having to force yourself to be someone who you really can never be in order to try to fit into society's expectations. And it is not easy. It's not just as easy as saying like, well, I'm going to do my own thing. Like, well, maybe some people can, but from the people I talk to, it is a multi-year journey. So it's just, I love seeing that. I love seeing what people define as success and how they achieve it in different ways. Yeah.
Sometimes for me, like the day when my executive functioning skills are even at like a 60-65%, I feel so happy that I'm able to do some basic tasks and kind of get them out of my way, because I have had days where getting out of the bed was impossible. Personal hygiene had gone for a toss. I was literally eating ice cream for breakfast.
Mm-hmm.
So even when I'm doing very, very things that may look insignificant to the person, from outside, that, oh, she's just making breakfast. But it's a huge deal for me, because that means that, I've been able to execute so many things and not get like sidetracked, because I also have that issue because of my ADHD. Be
Yeah.
focused on it and be able to do it and then move on to something, and, not get stuck, because that paralysis, that inertia, these are very real struggles that still show up on some days. So
Oh,
the
yeah.
days that I can overcome them, I consider all of them as very, like markers of success. And that's why I keep telling myself that how my life looks to other people cannot be, my parameter to decide whether or not it's a happy life, whether I'm successful in life or not. So I would say the diagnosis actually helped me to, in a way, become a more intentional person. I'm more in touch with like the ground reality of my living, as opposed to putting out an image or hustling because that's what we are all supposed to do. And then I also feel like an outlier at times because I can't, not many people can relate to what I tell them. So, which means that my community is only now of other neurodivergent individuals because they realize those struggles. But so it's interesting, I would say.
Wow. Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree with that. So, yeah, Shiny, it's been great talking with you today. How can people get in touch with you if they want to learn more about your writing?
They can reach me through LinkedIn. My LinkedIn profile
Mm-hmm.
is public and you can add the link. So
Mm-hmm.
if anybody's interested, my writing portfolio is there. I also wrote a personal essay about my entire diagnosis process and everything. That's also there because I am told that that has helped many people even start their journey. So that's how they can know more about me. And my email address is on my LinkedIn profile, so they can reach out to me directly for work or other, if anybody just wants to have a chat about, because I know how difficult this is. So it is always, I'd be very happy to help someone else who's on this similar journey. And thank you so much, firstly, for even having me and allowing me to just, I don't know if I like stuck to all the right things or not, because I tend to digress and get sidetracked. But everything is like it's a feature, it's not a bug. That's how I have made peace with it.
Yeah, well, I really appreciate you sharing your story. And, I could probably talk with you for another hour, but I know it's getting really late where you are in your time zone.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I'll let you go soon. As we close out, is there anything else that you'd like our listeners to know or anything they can help or support you with?
I think what people need to understand is that, firstly, invisible disabilities are just as real as the visible ones. And there is no look of a neurodivergent person, because I have got this so much that you don't look autistic, oh, you can talk well, or you look put together, so you can't have ADHD. These are just, these are your stereotypes that you think that people have to fit into, but that is not how life goes. And self-diagnosis is valid, and if someone is coming to you with the fact that they have done this research and they have read up and they feel that they may either have ADHD or they may be on the spectrum, or there are various other types of neurodivergence out there, do not, like, the first reaction shouldn't be to invalidate them. And this I would request the healthcare professionals as well as like the actual parents, caregivers, spouse, partner, friends, whoever they are. And and accommodations, they help everyone. Like, I was just having a conversation with this friend whose workplace is not willing to give her these accommodations, such as working from home full time. And it is just appalling that these are things that help everyone in the system, and they just make everything more accessible to neurodivergent folks. So just think about it. And this, especially in the Indian context, because the awareness about generally mental health awareness is very poor, and neurodivergence is definitely not part of everyone's vocabulary.
Yeah.
So I hope that whoever will listen to this will make an effort in that direction.
Yeah, wonderful. Well, yeah, thanks again, Shayonee. It's been great talking with you, and thanks so much for sharing your story today on my show.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for having me. It was lovely talking to you.